Distinguished participants, distinguished speakers, colleagues, good afternoon, good morning, good day to all. My name is Tishka Francis. I lead the Small Island Developing States Subprogram at the United Nations Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, or UNOHRLLS. I would like to welcome you all to the Partnership Training for Sustainable Development Goal 14, Oceans and Seas. The training is an initiative by the Division for Sustainable Development Goals, DSDG, of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, and the Partnering Initiative, TPI, in collaboration with the Government of Ireland and the United Nations Office of the High Representative, OHRLLS. We are so very pleased to have you with us today. And in today's session, we will hear from a range of speakers on the value of partnerships for SDG 14. So before we start, I just want to go over some of the house rules that we have all now come to know. The training will be recorded and posted online. Breakout groups, however, will not be recorded. So we encourage you to help make this an interactive session by using the chat for both questions and comments. And finally, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. So I would like to take the opportunity now to go over the agenda for the session today. First, we will have welcoming remarks and then a keynote address. This would be followed by a presentation on how SIDS and the private sector can build equitable partnerships for sustainable ocean development. Then there will be a training presentation on the value of effective partnerships, and then followed by a peer-to-peer exchange. So with that, I will now ask my dear colleague to bring welcome opening remarks. Ms. Lotta Tahtinen, Chief of the Outreach and Partnerships Branch of DSDG in UNDESA. Ms. Tahtinen, you have the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tishka. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues. I'm so very happy to be able to participate in the opening of this partnership training for SDG 14, Oceans and Seas. Let me start by thanking the Government of Ireland for their generous funding contribution to this training, which is making this training happen, and for their previous contribution to UNDESA in supporting small island developing states. I would also like to pay special thanks to our other partners, the United Nations Office of the High Representative for Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, OHRLLS, and of course the Partnering Initiative for their collaboration in making this training happen. Dear colleagues, as you know, this past summer, the governments of Portugal and Kenya hosted the second United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon, Portugal. This conference came at a critical time as the world is strengthening its efforts to mobilize, create, and drive solutions to make the 17 Sustainable Development Goals happen by their target year 2030. On the final day of the conference, member states adopted the Lisbon Political Declaration, which amongst many other things calls for scaling up science-based and innovative actions to address the urgent ocean crisis. Colleagues, partnerships and collaborations are at the very heart of achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, including SDG 14 on life below water. Sustainable development can only happen when different actors across various sectors come together to combine their resources and pull in the same direction. Each stakeholder can contribute different resources, competencies, and aspirations that can potentially, through successful partnering, be brought together around a common vision. UNDESA, the Partnering Initiative, and several other UN entities are collaborating to promote effective multi-stakeholder partnerships and engagement through what is called the 2030 Agenda Partnership Accelerator Program. This program, the Partnership Accelerator, supports national governments, UN resident coordinator offices, and other stakeholders in bolstering collaborations between stakeholders and sectors, and to enhance their capabilities and skills in forging partnerships in support of the SDGs. The work of the Partnership Accelerator Program is focused around 3 areas. Firstly, analytical and mapping of stakeholders and partnerships. Secondly, providing training and advisory services. And thirdly, developing guidance and tools for making partnerships more effective. And these tools and guidance are made available to all stakeholders for free online on the Partnership Accelerator website. And I invite you all to explore this website, which is partnershipaccelerator.org. And I'm asking my colleagues to please type in the website in the chat box. Dear colleagues, our hope is that this training will give you the necessary foundations and tools to partner effectively in support of SDG 14, and to leave you inspired and motivated to collaborate with partners across different sectors. I sincerely thank you all for your presence here today and for your commitment in building effective and genuine partnerships for our ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lotte, for those opening remarks. And with that, I will hand over to introduce your remarks, Dr. Sinead Walsh, Climate Unit Director, Department of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Ireland. Dr. Walsh, you have the mic.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and it's great to join you this evening. I guess it's probably radically different times for each of us, but evening time here in Ireland. And I'm delighted to get the chance to welcome you participants to this partnership training, and a big thanks to the Partnership Accelerator and also to UNDESA for organizing it, and other partners I know have made really important inputs. I think from what we can see, we think this course looks like it will be really important and really useful. And we're really happy to see it because it aligns quite closely with Ireland's prioritization of oceans issues, and also our very close relationship with SIDS. So I was glad to see there in the chat various countries that we work very closely with that are able to join today, as well as, of course, great ocean champions like Portugal and others. And this is a big priority for Ireland to work with SIDS on adaptation and also on the management of marine resources and sustainable development. I mean, I think everybody in this virtual room will know that you know, our societies are intrinsically linked to the health of the ocean through the air we breathe, the food we eat, climate and weather, and so on. And at the same time, I think by virtue of the fact that everybody is here, we're conscious of the huge risks and great pressures on the world's oceans at the moment, and also the increasing demand for goods and services, such as for renewable energy, blue carbon storage, food production, and so on. And I think it's very clear to us that we can't meet all the new demands and ambitions for this sustainable blue economy if we don't enhance the resilience of the ocean, protect the biodiversity and the pollution prevention aspect as well. So this course is really timely. I notice it's after COP27, before COP15, and you know, I think it's a great time to be looking at the kind of measures that need to happen to make to make this to increase the sustainability of the ocean. And a healthy ocean. Many of you will know, all of you may know that we're an island ourselves in Ireland with a maritime area, which is 7 times the size of our land area. I know that is dwarfed by many SIDS who sometimes have even much larger maritime areas, but it is a huge sort of, it's very central to our lives in Ireland, the ocean, and we're quite seized of these issues, and then increasingly we're scaling up our kind of work on the climate ocean nexus in a few different ways, looking at climate change, marine pollution and biodiversity on the one hand, and then looking at jobs and livelihoods of communities. And we also do quite a lot of work on the international governance of the ocean. And I think Lotte already put it really well when she talked about partnerships. I mean, clearly nobody can do this alone. For Ireland, our ocean focus is very closely aligned with SIDS and also LDCs that are on the ocean, and I think everybody has a different role to play, and we all need to work together in partnership, because none of us are going to make much headway alone. So really just great to see this course, and I hope you all find it enriching, and will certainly be very interested from the Irish perspective in watching this work go forward. So thanks very much, and have a good session this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh, for those remarks. So now I would like to introduce a keynote address by Ambassador Peter Thompson, UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean, and we will have this addressed by recorded video.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all, and thank you for the opportunity of addressing you today, especially to you, UNDESA and OHRLS, for organizing this event. We're gathered to launch a course aimed at building effective partnerships in support of the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14, SDG 14. In my experience, partnership is key to progress, so I'm doubly grateful for the attention being paid today to SDG 14's implementation. Everything is connected. The people to the land to the ocean to the people, and all creatures of this planet. Growing up in the islands of Fiji, I learned to respect the ocean as a source, the source of being. I experience its power and beauty and its strong connection with people, be it in our daily sustenance and passage, or the effects of fair weather and foul. My daily mantra is, there can be no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. And sadly, the ocean's health is measurably in decline. To all those who care about the well-being of their children and grandchildren, the urgent task at hand is to stop that decline and then to commence restoration of the ocean's health. My role as Special Envoy for the Ocean is to lead the advocacy for global action to implement SDG 14, setting out to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. As you know, advancement of SDG 14 is guided by specific targets, focusing on such issues as reduction of marine pollution, protection of marine and coastal ecosystems, minimizing ocean acidification, and ending illegal and overfishing. On all these targets, while we are continuing to lose the battle, forecasts improved in 2022. Thanks to UNEA's agreement to negotiate a legally binding treaty to control plastic pollution, and to the WTO Ministerial Council's decision to end harmful fisheries subsidies. But until robust treaties are in place for the control of plastic pollution and for the governance of the high seas, the so-called BB&J Treaty, the decline in the ocean's health continues. FAO reports that global fish stocks are 34% overfished, and that IUU fishing remains rampant. So we have serious work at hand to improve the fisheries sector. Meanwhile, the WTO agreement to which I referred to end harmful fisheries subsidies only comes into effect when 2/3 of the parties deposit their instruments of national acceptance with WTO. And so far, none of them have. I say again, we have urgent work at hand. The science is clear. The ocean is undergoing unprecedented changes as a result of human activities. Of course, the most pernicious of these activities is the swelling belch of anthropogenic greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, causing, amongst other planetary ills, the acidifying and warming of the ocean, resulting in death of coral reefs and rising sea levels. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2022 United Nations Ocean Conference, held in Lisbon in June, came at a critical time for the global community as it seeks to find better ways to support SDG 14 and stop the decline in the ocean's health. The conference resulted in a wide range of science-driven and innovative solutions. Many of these came in the form of voluntary commitments from broad sectors of society, all captured in the UN's Ocean Registry of Commitments. With over 2,000 commitments and counting, I encourage you to explore this rich database of ocean action and consider registering your own commitments with UNDESA. Ladies and gentlemen, our world has limited resources, be they financial, technological, natural, or human. Thus, as a society, we must seek to optimize and pool our resources to deliver sustainable development. Surely the days are over when linear pursuit of finite planetary resources is seen as a rational way to conduct ourselves on this planet. Rather than GDP, circularity, recycling, resilience, and sustainability are fast becoming the watchwords of progress. Neither is working separately in silos, blinkered from the big picture, a rational option for our future well-being. As I've already said, everything is connected, and it will be our ability to discover and share that will determine whether we suffer a Malthusian future or live in a world ruled by equity, sustainability, and respect for Mother Nature. In that regard, partnerships provide powerful opportunities for joint thinking and action, creating more transformative change than could possibly be achieved alone. It must be said that building, managing, and sustaining partnerships require skills that do not necessarily come inherently. They are skills that must be learned, practiced, and valued to ensure effective and long-lasting impact. And may I say that in my experience, mutual trust is the key element in successful partnerships. During this course, you will learn from experienced practitioners about how to forge and foster multi-stakeholder partnerships and how to make them work, and I commend the work of all involved. Ladies and gentlemen, working together with commitment and diligence, I'm confident we'll be able to take the necessary strides to reach SDG 14's targets by 2030. I wish you productive and fruitful training in the coming days and look forward to learning of the outcomes of your good efforts. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Thompson, for that keynote address, and to all of the speakers before for your remarks. And now we move on to the next segment of today's session, in which we will have a presentation on how SIDS and the private sector can build equitable partnerships for sustainable development. And that presentation will be by my colleague, Mr. Damien Sass, Program Management Officer from UNOHRLS. And Damien, you now have the mic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tishka. And I'm going to just share my screen as well. So I trust you can share, you can see that. All right, great. So my presentation will focus on a report that was carried out by my office, commissioned earlier this year for the SIDS Global Business Network. I will present more about the business network itself at the end of the presentation. But before I introduce the report, I wanted to start off with a couple of observations that sort of help make the case for why the ocean-based economy is so crucial for small island developing states, but globally as well. So by 2030, many ocean-based industries have the potential to outperform the growth of the global economy as a whole, both in terms of value added, but also employment. And investing in an ocean economy clearly, therefore, makes economic sense. Each dollar invested in the sustainable ocean economy will yield, on average, $5 in return. And indeed, many SIDS refer to themselves as large ocean states and are already making efforts to build blue economies to protect ocean resources, and as well as advancing economic development and climate action. Through their exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, SIDS control roughly 30% of all oceans and seas. For example, St. Lucia has a marine reserve the size of Germany, while Tuvalu has an EEZ 27,000 times its landmass. The potential for the ocean economy in SIDS is really enormous, to say the very least. And the question is, how can SIDS, the private sector, and other stakeholders work together to reap the benefits of the ocean economy? And to help answer that question, we have a new report, which I mentioned, that attempts at least to provide some answers. The report presents deep dives into case studies in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, as well as the Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, and South China Sea region. It also presents expert interviews exploring the private sector's role in the sustainable blue economy of SIDS. And I will share, obviously, the link to that report as well with you. So it then uses case studies to come up with 10 sustainable partnership goals. And the goals address persistent challenges to effective collaboration between small island developing states and the private sector. And I guess the caveat here is that the report is focusing on ocean-related partnerships, but it's safe to say that the findings also apply across other sectors. So these are the 10 goals, as you can see on the screen. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all 10 goals, but I will focus on those that address important issues which came up through a survey that was conducted to support drafting the report. In preparing the report, the feedback from the private sector, from SIDS, governments, and civil society representatives was sought in terms of the main challenges that these different parties faced in forging partnerships. And it probably comes as no surprise that financing is at the top of the list. Top of the list in terms of challenges that everyone faces. Other challenges that rank high include connecting with appropriate organizations and government agencies in the case of the private sector, and also assessing and mitigating risk in the case of governments. So let's begin then with funding. I think it goes without saying that capital is needed at every stage, from capacity building to project funding and insurance. And because so many SIDS are unable to access international capital markets, in part due to their high debt levels, in some cases low credit ratings or small market size, private business and investment is really critical to funding their sustainable development efforts. Partnerships can certainly help business and investors pool resources. It opens doors to new funding opportunities, and it also helps to reduce risk. And island governments are already starting to tap into some very innovative financing opportunities. So let's start with an example out of the Seychelles. Debt for nature swaps are really gaining traction lately by offering a creative solution to restructuring SIDS' heavy debt loads, establishing national commitments to environmental conservation, and also creating financial flows to fund those efforts. And in order to build climate resilience and build its blue economy, the Seychelles signed a very unique deal in 2015 through a $21.6 million debt restructure in exchange for the country doing more to protect its oceans. The debt for nature swap involved the Nature Conservancy buying the debt in exchange for the creation of 13 new marine protected areas. 5 years after the deal, the Seychelles went from protecting 0.04% to 30% of its national waters, an area covering some 410,000 square kilometers of ocean. That's larger than the size of Germany. The Seychelles then went a step further, issuing so-called blue bonds. In 2018, the Seychelles announced the launch of the world's first sovereign blue bond, which raised around $15 million for international investors. And that bond supports the Blue Grants Fund by the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. Grants have also been issued to at least 23 projects to advance sustainable fisheries in the country. And while the Seychelles has led the way, most recently, there's also an example coming out of Belize. Belize has also signed a debt for nature swap with the Nature Conservancy. That's helped the country to reduce its external debt by 10% of GDP and enabling Belize to spend around $4 million a year on marine conservation until 2041. And so building on these successes as well, my office is also working with the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean on the establishment of a Caribbean Resilience Fund that will also involve aspects of debt for climate swaps. So on the one hand, you have these major funding approaches like debt for nature swaps, that's in the tune of millions of dollars. But it's also important to keep in mind that smaller grant-based initiatives also exist and can have a great impact, especially when working with small and medium enterprises at the national level. So for instance, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund offers smaller grants that can have a really big impact on local sustainability efforts. In 2020, the fund provided a grant of about $33,000 to Serenity Dive, a local dive shop, for an initiative to combine its dive training with a coral reef restoration program. And with its relatively small grants, Serenity Dive was able to develop its own coral nursery and restoration program. And this initiative also led the dive company to launch an umbrella program for similar projects nationally. Serenity Dive works with the local fisheries division to coordinate coral plantings, and the company received a duty-free concession for equipment to set up the nursery. And there are so many other examples like it, but this is really a great example of where grant financing can help bridge funding gaps for MSMEs and provide the seed that then allows the private sector to also expand their programs that gain essentially a life of their own. Another major opportunity that is gaining traction for SIDS is that of blended finance. So for untested markets, large-scale development projects that require more upfront capital, and you're dealing with risk-averse private investors, blended finance is an increasingly attractive option. So take, for instance, the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which launched in September 2020. This is a prime example of pulling together public and philanthropic funding to catalyze private investment. Co-financed by the Global Fund for Coral Reefs and the UN Joint SDG Fund, Fiji, for example, they have a joint program for coral reef and blue economy investments that brings together some $10 million from philanthropic and development finance to invest in commercially viable coral reef conservation and reef positive livelihoods. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs model is that it operates its blended finance almost as a combined incubator and accelerator, providing grants at the incubator stage of a project to fund technical assistance, capacity development, as well as monitoring efforts, and then investment when a project then is ready to scale up at the accelerator stage. So these are just some of the various funding avenues out there, and I encourage you again to read the reports for more of these types of case studies across small island developing states. So it then brings me to the next sort of major issue or major point that the report also goes into, which is about making connections. Partnerships start by making connections between companies and governments, between regional organizations and solutions providers, between people essentially. And in interviews and survey responses for the report, finding potential partners was a universal challenge to moving a project forward. Those connections, often made by chance, are what bring together the right private sector partners and the right organizations, investors, as well as government agencies. So take, for instance, the Moana Taka partnership. The public-private partnership came about entirely by chance. Simon Bennett, who was Swire Pacific's general manager of sustainable development, attended the third session of the UN Environment Assembly in 2017 because he was the only representative from the Singapore Environment Council with a valid yellow fever inoculation. And it was the first year that business representatives were invited to attend. And a day before the conference, Mr. Bennett happened to be in the right room to hear a discussion with the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program about waste pollution in the Pacific Island countries and territories. And Mr. Bennett happened to have a solution in the form of empty shipping containers that were already passing between islands. And under the partnership, Swire Shipping provides the containers and ocean freight carriage pro bono. And this enables private sector companies in the Pacific to move recyclable waste to countries with proper recycling facilities. So far, 21 Pacific Island countries and territories are participating, and they've collectively shipped over 100 tons of waste to be recycled. And it's a really great example of cooperation between governments, civil society, and the private sector. And while this chance connection turned out really beneficial for all involved, I think an important lesson is that we can't leave synergies to chance. What's important and what's needed is a more deliberate, inclusive approach to inviting businesses to the table. And rather than waiting for a solution in need of a problem to solve, regional organizations and intergovernmental organizations can focus efforts on bringing in business and investments, articulating critical issues for a given region, and then finding ways to plug the right resources into those problems. Another important point here is the need to amplify existing hubs and platforms. Very often there's a tendency to build more initiatives and more hubs independent of efforts that are already underway. Perhaps another mindset that needs to shift is the impulse to build competing efforts rather than collaborating on what is already out there. Private sector actors looking to partner can approach organizations working at the national, regional, or global level to help bridge the gap between government and the private sector, bringing together technical expertise, relevant agencies, and also an understanding of a country's specific political and project landscape. Organizations can also act as project champions, advocating to potential partners. These organizations are many, ranging from local chambers of commerce and also regional private sector organizations such as the Pacific Islands Private Sector Organization, PIPSO, as well as the Caribbean Export Development Agency. And certainly the United Nations is present in most, if not all, SIDS, and more often than not have programs in place to partner with the private sector, both locally and across regions. One other issue or a major issue that again also was brought up in the report and was in the table that I showed earlier is this issue of assessing and mitigating risk. Reluctance from the private sector and also investors to take on development in SIDS often comes down to risk. Understanding exactly what those risks are and how to effectively manage them is really key to attracting more private sector engagement in SIDS. So some of these SIDS-specific risks include impacts from climate change. It includes operational risks such as geographic isolation and dependence on external resources. There are market risks like high debt, economic volatility, and economic homogeneity. And also regulatory risks that include unfamiliar bureaucracy and limited resources. And an important lesson learned here is that solid data helps to mitigate some of these perceived risks. And certainly their data gaps are really issues that come up time and time again for SIDS. So reliable market data helps investors and solution providers understand market opportunities and find the balance between risk and return. It also helps policymakers in SIDS to prioritize action and understand what partnerships will be most beneficial to pursue. Another important area in mitigating risk is developing robust partner criteria to ensure a partnership's viability. And at the same time, creating an enabling environment for innovation is particularly important. Sustainable development is about innovation in many ways, which often involves the risk of untested markets and technologies. And so the question is, how can SIDS make investments in innovation more appealing? We touched on this earlier. Blended finance is one way to pool resources and reduce risk. Another is looking at so-called first loss products to attract reluctant investors. And this is something that governments could take on a role in. Say, for instance, for investments in our countries, we would be willing to look at first loss or helping to protect investors who want to initiate a startup in our country. Pilot projects to assess risk and show success can also be important. A technology or project made to launch at small scale can be a less financially risky way to show viability and improve return on investments before scaling up. And such short-term successes can also be a key to getting stakeholder buy-in. And indeed, SIDS in the past and currently as well, promote themselves as potential labs for innovation. So there is that willingness from governments to work with investors to incubate innovations that have potential for scaling up in country, but also overseas. I think another point here also is that insurance can play a role in funding conservation efforts. Insurance of ocean assets, such as reefs, is an increasingly viable option for transferring risk in SIDS, while at the same time investing or incentivizing rather climate resilient efforts and supporting disaster recovery. One example is the Asian Development Bank and the Global Environment Facility project called Partnerships for Coral Reef Finance and Insurance in Asia and the Pacific. The project is developing climate risk financing and insurance solutions to protect coral reef ecosystems, including in Fiji and the Solomon Islands. And a final point to make here is that the United Nations is currently developing a multi-dimensional vulnerability index. The MVI, as it's also known, is being developed by an independent high-level panel co-chaired by the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda and the former Prime Minister of Norway. And while this work is expected to conclude at the end of June of next year, the MVI has potential to better illuminate in an evidence-based manner the vulnerabilities of SIDS, but importantly, how those vulnerabilities can be overcome by understanding the risk profiles of individual SIDS and how to overcome those risks. So at the beginning, I referred to the SIDS Global Business Network. And so I'm going to wrap up this presentation by telling you a bit about the business network. The Small Island Developing States Global Business Network, or SIDS-GBN for short, is run by UNOHRLS, our office, and is designed to harness the innovation of the private sector to achieve sustainable development in SIDS. And this is done primarily through a business forum held every 2 years. And the idea that the network came out of a private sector forum that OHRLS organized at the 3rd International Conference on SIDS in 2014. And since then, the business forum has taken place in Aruba in 2016, focusing on public-private partnerships. In 2018, the forum took place in Mauritius, focusing on partnerships for sustainable tourism. And in 2020, because of the pandemic, it moved online through a series of webinars. And then earlier this year, the forum took place in Palau, focusing on ocean partnerships. The forum convenes the private sector, it brings together governments, the UN system, and others to share best practices and lessons learned in forging private sector partnerships with SIDS. In essence, the forum covers all the areas that I've spoken to, from financing to making connections to announcing new and exciting partnerships. We'd like to think that our advocacy for private sector partnerships has meant that international companies have begun to speak the language of SIDS, and considering how the special challenges of island nations factor into their corporate strategies. So you can learn more about the SIDS-GBN online by visiting the address that's on the screen right now, and also follow on LinkedIn. The next business forum is planned for 2024, and it will be held in the Caribbean. So we really look forward to seeing you all there as well. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I provided some food for thought and some questions for you to keep in mind for the coming partnership dialogues with organizations like Parley for the Oceans, who we've also partnered with through the SIDS-GBN, others like the Blue Action Fund, Blue Ventures, and others, in terms of how they've addressed issues around funding, around building rapport with governments and organizations, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Damien, for that very comprehensive presentation, which gives us a solid foundation for the rest of the session. So now I have the pleasure to hand over to Dr. Darian Stibbe, Executive Director of the Partnering Initiative, for his presentation on the value of effective partnerships. And Dr. Stibbe would also take us into the peer-to-peer exchange and the rest of the session. Thank you so much, Dr. Stibbe Darian, and have a great rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tisca. Thank you so much, Damien, for a really fascinating look at what is such an important issue, this private sector partnerships. Certainly we see all over the world that these are absolutely key for unlocking the investment that can then really deliver the sustainable development that we require, well beyond SDG 14, but basically pretty much all of the SDGs. The private sector, the role of the private sector is going to be more and more essential. So my name is Darian. I am the director of the Partnering Initiative. We are one of the partners in the Partnership Accelerator. And I've been working for probably about 20 years or so in multi-stakeholder partnerships for development, and with the UN system for about 15 years of that, but also extensively with companies, with foundations, with NGOs, with civil society organizations, with foundations, with all sectors of society. And what I've seen over the last 20 years or so is that there is now more and more a total clarity about the need for these partnerships. For 10 years ago, we were trying to push the concept, the idea that these partnerships are essential for delivering sustainable development. That case has been made. So there is massive demand. There is huge rhetoric to say, we need more collaboration. We need all society to get behind the sustainable development goals. But the reality, as we've heard, is it is challenging, trying to get organizations from different societal sectors with different incentives, ways of thinking, approaches, timescale, language, finding what that common vision can be that brings all of them together, and then creating a partnership that genuinely delivers value for all of the partners is challenging. And that, of course, is the purpose, the reason why we have this course, is because there is an understanding that partnering has a real set of professional capacities that are required if we are going to be able to deliver effective partnerships that genuinely create significant value. So in this course, I was going to introduce what we'll be doing over the next several days. So today and tomorrow, and then Monday and Tuesday of next week as well. And within these 4 sessions, we will be looking, first of all, today, we're going to be looking at sort of the basics, the basis for partnering in the first place. You know, why are we partnering? What's the value that's created by these partnerships? Then tomorrow, we'll be looking at the partnership relationship, looking at that mixture of trust, of commitment, of power balances, of mutual benefit that collectively are required if we are going to have effective partnerships. Then module 3 is going to be looking at the development of partnerships and how you build these partnerships and the building blocks that together make strong partnerships. And finally, module 4 next Tuesday, we'll be looking at managing partnerships and how to ensure that they stay on track and continue to deliver. Now, in each of these courses, each of these modules, what we're going to have is I'll be presenting some of the sort of the theory behind partnerships. Then there'll be a peer-to-peer exchange where you can exchange your own experiences. And then finally, sort of a panel session with a group of really experienced partnership people who will be sort of sharing their experiences as well. All of this is in aid of trying to build up what we call the must-have partnering competencies. So these are the professional competencies that we see are essential to be able to build strong partnerships. And these range from the mindset for partnership, to having a desire to reach out, a desire to work with others, a desire to want to collaborate to deliver more, and a real understanding of our own limitations. And that actually we don't always have the right answer, that others will often, particularly those closest to the problem, those with lived experience, will have answers that we simply don't have ourselves. But it's also a mindset shift that when we're partnering, it's not about us, it's about all of the partners and how ensuring that all partners get value from a partnership and how we can collectively deliver on collective objectives around a shared vision. So that's all part of the mindset shift that is necessary in order to build these collaborations. The second one is this idea of we need to understand other sectors better. So if we're going to be working with business more, we need to understand the language of business and the incentives and the interests and the motivations and the resources that business can bring. I can't tell you for how many years people thought of business simply as a cash machine, able to contribute funding to whatever projects the UN or NGOs wish to deliver. We need to understand them better. We need to understand our own organizational cultures, be able to bridge between these cultures. The third level is around the skills, the human relationship skills. So the negotiation, the trust building, the facilitation, the communication, all of these things, sometimes called the soft skills, can actually be some of the hardest skills to master. And they're all essential for building that relationship that we'll talk about tomorrow. Finally, there's a technical partnering knowledge. There is an understanding about what are the building blocks of effective partnership, what goes into a good partnering agreement, how do you go about reviewing partnerships and keeping them on track. So there's this technical partnering knowledge as well. So altogether, what we call these must-have competencies basically make up these professional capabilities that the more people that can have, if we were partnering with people and organizations that have these same capabilities and the same language and the same approaches to developing partnerships, then we will be able to develop partnerships far more quickly and much more likely to actually deliver. Now, over the next 3.5 sessions, everything that I will be presenting and we will be talking about can be found within these 2 guidebooks developed by the Partnership Accelerator. So the first one is the SDG Partnership Guidebook, which is full of frameworks and tools and top tips and all sorts of things. And then a second guidebook, which is a supplement to the first one, which is looking specifically for small islands, looking at SIDS and partnering within SIDS. But before we get going, I should also just mention that everything I say is necessarily at a certain sort of, in a way, it's kind of generic level of partnering. And it's actually very much up to you to be able to take the to take what you see here and to contextualize it to your particular situation. Because partnerships are of all different forms, from very informal partnerships that you just basically develop with other people. Perhaps even one can even talk about sort of teamwork between people. It's a very informal type of partnership. And then you have also very formal, major, large-scale partnerships involving large amounts of money. And that, of course, has to be extremely sort of formal, et cetera, with all sorts of, with governance issues, with finance issues, with rules, and all of these things. So we need to sort of think about the type of partnering that we're personally involved in and take whatever is presented here into our own context. So apparently it's showing in presenter mode. Apologies for that. Let me just try and fix that. There seems to be a bit of a glitch. And try that again. Hopefully that's now showing the right screen. Somebody shout if it is not. Better. Thank you very much, Jordan. Apologies for that. So let's get going. Let's have a little look. So we've heard already a little bit, about the need for partnering and about bringing sectors together. But why should they? Why should business and government and civil society work together? And the reality is it's because they all want the same thing. They all need peace, a strong economy, a healthy environment, good infrastructure, political stability. All of these things are what makes business thrive or allows business to thrive. It's what government is mandated to deliver, and it's what civil society wants to achieve. So we actually really do have the same goals. We actually all do have the same idea that we want this. We want a healthy environment. We want a thriving society. We want prosperous business. And this, in a sense, is true for sort of the full landscape of development actors. What does that look like in practice? Who are all these development actors who actually all do have or potentially have this shared vision? So here we have, if you look at this, the various stakeholders, of course, at the top we have government. And when we're thinking about partnerships, we're thinking about the resources that all the stakeholders can bring. And the government can bring its taxation, its regulation, its investment in infrastructure, its delivery of public services. These are all resources that government is able to bring to the table. The private sector, of course, they have the products and services that they produce, which can certainly be pro-development, pro-sustainable development. They have the innovation and the ability to be creative and developing new technologies. They have marketing budgets and reach and access to their customers and to their clients and to their employees, etc., etc. In fact, they bring all sorts of things which actually are far more interesting than funding, than money. Academia brings the ability to build capacity, to train, to create data, to provide evidence, etc., etc. Then we've got local communities, NGOs, civil society organizations, the voice of the people, those with the real knowledge about what's happening on the ground and the best position to advise on new solutions, but also bringing technical solutions from around the world. Then we have development cooperation, the donors, the funders potentially, and foundations as well, who can provide funding of various sorts, but also political influence too. The United Nations system can absolutely provide technical assistance and convening power. We heard already from Damien about many of the things that the UN is doing to help to make these partnerships happen. And then, of course, we have neighboring governments, and we have regional alliances and networks and bodies as well, all able to bring their resources to the table. Because if we can do this, if we can realize we have a whole lot of different resources and we can pull them together into different ways, different parts of the solution to a jigsaw puzzle, then we have a real potential to find new innovative ways that can be far more transformational in delivering the SDG 14 targets. So when we talk about partnerships, well, what do we mean? We talk about an ongoing collaborative relationship between organizations around a common vision, common objectives, combining their complementary resources and sharing risk to deliver maximum added value towards SDG 14 while delivering benefit to all partners. And this is really important, this concept of maximum added value, because partnerships are a pain. They are difficult, they take time, they take resources, they are challenging. And if we're going to go to the effort of making them happen, they really need to deliver far more than the sum of their parts. And that's how we have this idea that 1 + 1 has to equal 5 in partnerships. If you can do something another way other than partnership, I recommend you do it, because partnering is not for the faint of heart. You need that strong commitment. It has to be worth it. But of course, this is quite a generic definition still, and we need to get a bit more specific about what we actually mean by partnerships. And for this, we have this idea, this framework that we can get a better idea of the different forms of collaboration that we see. So the first level is really about when an organization contributes something to us, or we contribute something to them, for them to go off and deliver their usual programs. And I'll give examples of these in a moment. The second level gets a bit more interesting. This is where we're actually taking different resources that different sectors bring to the table and combining them to deliver something we simply couldn't otherwise. Something because we can deliver certain synergies between programs and projects. It could be that we are combining the commerciality of business with the rules and regulations shift from governments, along with the capacity building of NGOs, whatever it may be. We're able in some way to be able to deliver something that's more efficient, more effective, more innovative, more sustainable, because we're combining societal resources. And then finally, there's this concept of system transformation. And I'll talk more about that in just a second, but let's just get some examples first. So in terms of leverage exchange, this is as simple, or could be as simple as, a company donating money to an NGO to go and deliver the NGO's mission. So in this case, this is the Caribbean Bottling Company, which was sponsoring beach cleanups by the Friends of the Environment in the Bahamas. Caribbean Bottling Company, it doesn't do anything different. It's just giving some money transactionally. The Friends of the Environment, again, they're just receiving money to go and do their work. So you're not actually delivering more than the sum of the parts. You're just simply leveraging others' resources. But then this is where it gets interesting, because this level 2 is where we are actually combining really quite different resources to deliver something we just simply couldn't do otherwise. An example here is the Caribbean Tourism and Health Partnership, which is I think it's almost a unique program. And it's this sort of multifaceted, multi-sectoral approach, which is around creating real-time early warning response and through a sort of a health information system. And this system, of course, is populated by the cruise companies, by the hotels, etc., who are collecting the data and being able to then have an early warning system where if they get if there's some sort of virus, some sort of catching illness, then they can very, very quickly then spread the news, spread the data to CARPHA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And of course, then through that then goes out very quickly to other members to be able to spot the warning signs of potential outbreak within other hotels or on cruise lines, etc., etc. It does other things as well. But the point is that something like this would not be possible without public and private getting together and collectively using all the resources they have to deliver benefits to all. This doesn't require some huge amount of funding, some huge investment funding. It's using the resources that we have available to then deliver very significant benefits, in this case to the health of tourists and therefore the health of tourism within the Caribbean, but without some huge external funding. And finally, this concept of system transformation. And what do we mean by that? What we mean is it's around taking a current system of some sort, and the system could be anything. It could be a health system, an education system. It could be anything from people being used to eating unhealthy food and wanting to shift what is an unsustainable system for whatever reason, because it's environmentally unfriendly, or it is bad for people's health, or it is just inefficient and has high costs. We want to shift that to a much more sustainable, optimized system. And we want to shift that permanently so that the partnership is a temporary partnership that is able to really transform an unsustainable to a sustainable system. Right, give you an example, show you what I mean. So one example is around generation of electricity. And in many countries, in many coastal areas, in many SIDS, we see that there is too much energy which is produced through whether it be coal or oil or other dirty generation systems. And that is unsustainable. It's using up carbon, natural resources. It costs a huge amount. And we know that one of the biggest challenges with SIDS is around the cost of importing fuel. And of course, it has negative health benefit. It has a negative impact on people's health through the quality of the air, etc. That is an unsustainable system. Now we can visualize a sustainable system in which we've shifted over to renewable energy as the major source. And that's of course then sustainable for natural resources, is economically efficient, and actually can also increase people's livelihoods because it provides employment. It certainly improves people's lives because of the reduction in health issues. But how do we do that? How do we move from an unsustainable system to a sustainable one? And so it's this transformation, which is where multi-stakeholder partnerships can be so incredibly effective, because there are multiple different levers that can be used, or that different societal sectors can bring to the table that can force this transformation to happen. And so, for example, one lever is around policy and regulation and taxation. So governments can introduce policies to support transition to renewable energy. They can also use the taxation system by giving tax breaks to hotels that are willing to invest in their own renewable energy systems, or the opposite way around. They're using the stick by significantly taxing carbon-based energy generation. Of course, that then gives more and more significant incentives for the investments that we want to see. But then what else? There's also potentially a societal push to change the way that the society thinks and feels around carbon-based energy or renewable energy, such that we want to actually shift to a new societal norm where it's unacceptable to be using carbon for your energy source. Innovative technologies that the private sector can bring is going to be essential here. We need this. Can only be done in a way through, or the power of the private sector is that it can be done through a market-based approach, that we actually do have the technologies and it actually makes commercial sense as well, because if you invest now, you will make a significant savings. So the commercially viable approach also. Sometimes you will need access to finance. So whether it's development banks or private banks, whatever it may be, being able to provide that finance might be essential, one of these essential levers. It might be around capacity development, building up the skills of individuals to be able to work in developing this new infrastructure, renewable infrastructure. The point about all this is that it's only through these multi-stakeholder partnerships that you can combine these various different levers that can then shift from your unsustainable to your sustainable system and leave behind a permanent legacy that is then continuing to deliver sustainable benefits from then on, because you've shifted that system completely. So there you have it. That's what I wanted to talk about mainly today, was just to give you this introduction to this sort of the why of partnerships and what it is that they can deliver, these different forms of, these different levels of collaboration. Because now I want to very quickly get into the peer exchange, in which you can begin to start talking about your experiences and where you see there's most potential for multi-stakeholder partnerships to deliver towards the ocean goals in wherever you are. So we're going to put you into rooms and ask you to just talk with each other and come back in 15 minutes time, having just put some ideas down on a Padlet. It's like a mural. It's an online board that you can put your ideas about the areas that you think multi-stakeholder partnerships can most impact SDG 14. So hopefully we can put into the chat, just going to stop sharing, the link to the Padlet. Jordan, are you able to put that link in? There we go, brilliant. So the question is, which are the areas that you think you see that partnerships have the most potential to deliver towards SDG 14? And we'll go into breakout rooms now. If you just click on that link, so you've got the link to the Padlet where you can start recording with one post-it note per area, start recording what you think are the most important areas. And then we'll come back here in 15 minutes just to see what you've done and then round off the day. Okay. 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Okay, great. That should mean that everyone is back. If any of you, if you could put your cameras on, that'd be really helpful, just for this last 2 minutes as we do a little round up, just to see who you all are. And let's have a quick look. Let's see what you came up with in your two discussions. So here we have a whole lot of different areas. A couple of them talking about financial innovation and blended financing as financing of innovative projects to combat population and sustainability of marine resources. There's talking about, in particular, mangrove and coastal conservation. And in part, partnerships are required because so much of the land is privately owned. Then there's issues around sort of marine pollution, requiring efforts from stakeholders in the marine and terrestrial environment. much of the pollution in the ocean comes from non-point sources. Yeah, which really demonstrates just how wide the range of stakeholders and then potentially partners are going to be required to tackle some of these major issues. Then linkage between stakeholders, communication to align the vision between stakeholders, one of the major challenges to work on in partnerships. Absolutely, it's about trying to really help all stakeholders to understand actually they do want similar or the same or aligned things. Doesn't mean they have to want exactly the same thing, but as long as the overall vision, the objective of the partnership is able to deliver to all those stakeholders, then that suffices, then it's worth partnering. Then we've got the stony coral tissue loss disease issues. They have that on whichever island that is. Great work from Department of Environment. It'd be interesting to see more partnerships with our dive shops, especially since the disease has not reached two out of three islands. Some leadership to help businesses on the other islands rent clean gear to tourists without suffering huge loss in money would help. So absolutely. So it's around supporting the businesses to be able to operate in ways that don't result in the disease being spread and the environmental degradation because of it. So it becomes a public and a private issue. Then marine spatial planning, stakeholder engagement for conflict resolution and inclusivity. So this is the importance, absolutely, of engaging stakeholders in collectively trying to find solutions and resolve the conflicts around the use of resources. And then finally, talking about thinking outside the box. Opportunities within industry exist, can be achieved by starting the conversation between academia and industry. In some cases, there's no cost associated, but finding the right opportunity. Thank you all for all of those thoughts and ideas that came up. What we see is that in this area, there are so many opportunities. And as we heard earlier, some of it is around getting people in the room together to creatively come up with these ideas. Not everything requires money, but certainly some things absolutely do. And over the next 3 sessions, we're going to be looking at more and more in terms of what are those building blocks for effective partnership? How do we build up the quality of the relationship and the trust that we know is so important? How do we manage and keep these partnerships on track so they continue to deliver? And for the next 3 sessions, there'll be much more opportunity for you to be talking with each other and exchanging your experiences as well. So thank you all very much indeed for attending this first session. I hope to see as many of you as possible at the next one tomorrow, same time, same place. And I wish you all a very good day and evening. And thank you again to the Government of Ireland for supporting this workshop, and of course to the OHR LLS and DESA for arranging it. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.